What is up, everyone? Welcome to part 5 of the world's fastest Power Mac G3 Blue and White. Now let's dive straight into it. Let's open her up. I tell you what, folks, let's take a little look, see what's happening. Now, in the last video, I got the jumper settings round exactly the wrong way on this card. So the first thing we're going to do is swap those jumper settings, if I can feel for where the little switches are. I should say dip switches, they're not jumpers. There we go. Okay, so that is exactly inverted now to be RAID 0. And pretty much hardware-wise, we are so nearly there. I did have one comment saying, Tom, you should put a little fan on the heatsink. It doesn't need it. It really doesn't, because this CPU upgrade, even though it's a lot quicker, it's a different CPU, it's newer, it runs cooler, so it doesn't require an additional heatsink. But I will be putting a fan on it, probably, because for the most part, I think it'll just look really cool, and it'll be good fun to make that upgrade. I might get see if I can get one with blue blades or something to make it look pretty cool. Also, I need to get a new battery. Everyone's telling me to get a new battery, so I will do that. And also, I need to get some nice short blue SATA cables, and then we are pretty much laughing. And also I need to get a Bluetooth stick, so we'll do all of that ordering in a minute. I want to put Bluetooth in there. Surprisingly, I don't have one lying around. I don't know why. I used to have one in my MDD in the internal USB slot. No idea where that's gone. But anyway, we've flipped those dip switches. Basically all I want to do now at the beginning of this video is boot up the machine. Let's close her up. There we go. It's creaking a little bit, folks, and that is because the feet need tightening. Over time they do loosen. The handle needs tightening as well. As you can see, there's a bit of a play in it. It's just an Allen key fitting, so pretty easy to tighten. So let's power her up and see what she does. See if she still boots, because it's been a whole day since I finished recording part 4, and wow, I just can't believe how much progress we made in part 4. I was really nervous that this video series was going to get up into crazy, you know, part 8, part 9. I could sort of see it coming, but luckily this has been, well, I'm not going to speak too soon, you never know, but so far so good. I'm very pleased. Boot up is noticeably quicker on this machine now, guys. In fact, everything is super quick. Now then, aha! Now we're getting somewhere, folks. Let me zoom out slightly, so hopefully we can see a little more. Now, the card seems to have given us, hopefully, one disc. If we go to initialize, we should just see one disc. Oh my word. It has worked. Fantastic. Now, I know you couldn't see the screen in the last part, and someone left a really hilarious comment about it. I was laughing so much because I was pointing at fingers at the screen and you just couldn't see it. It was totally overexposed. But basically, in Disk Utility before, it showed up as a RAID, but then it only had one disk that you could select, and that was 237 gigs or something, so it was all messed up, and I tried to erase it and then it only saw one disk. So now that I've got the correct dip switch settings, it sees the 500 gigabyte RAID 0, which is awesome. So this is hardware RAID, which is good fun, and now that card is set, we can erase. And I'm going to call it IDE RAID for now, and the reason I'm going to do that is because I just want all of the labeling to be clear on the 3 drives. When we do benchmarks and things like that, I can always rename them to something a little bit more exciting. So this is a lovely pool of 500 gigabytes of drive storage, obviously half as reliable, or well, you know, if that, you know, quarter as reliable as just using one of the drives, but you know, obviously there's more that can go wrong in the RAID 0, but all of this is for fun anyway. So that has successfully created the volume, so we now have Macintosh SSD, which is our boot drive, storage SSD, and also IDE RAID. Now this is the update package to Tiger 10.9. What I'm going to do now as the next step is to download 10.7, no, not 10.9, sorry, 10.4.9, and I need to download 10.4.7 to see if it'll update to that. Luckily, Apple still have all of these files available on their website, which is quite handy. So that can sit there. And it's good to keep the machine running a little bit, just to see if it's stable. I know it's not necessarily doing anything, but just seeing if it's stable with the new CPU and all of the upgrades and things, because you have to admit, this is one hell of a hardware change. Here we have it, macOS 10 update 10.4.7 for PowerPC. Now we've got the straight up 10.4.7 and we've also got the combo PowerPC. We're going to go for just the normal update because of course we already have 10.4.6 installed. So we're going to download that and I can just bung it on the server and then copy it to the G3. I've made myself a special folder for the updates. And one thing that I am doing is opening the disk images on my main machine and then copying the installer over to my server and keeping it as well as the DMG. So I've actually got the installer package because the G3 was refusing to open the DMGs, or mount the DMGs, I should say. So that's just something interesting of note as well. I tend to find that although I love Tiger and Leopard and the older OSs, as far as mounting DMGs goes, I have much better luck with the newer versions of macOS. Lovely and speedy coming off of my file server writing to the SSD on this machine. So let's give the straight up update a go. Fantastic. It now wants me to install that. Great. Install. The other one wasn't letting me install. That is now installing nice and quickly. In case anyone is a bit lost as to why I'm not doing this through software update, software update will grab the latest and greatest. It'll grab 10.4.11 and download the bundle. When that happens, CPU Director, which is the application that allows me to set my CPU to a 1 GHz clock speed, that will no longer run at all. It's not even like it's unstable or whatever. Support stopped for that application at Tiger 10.4.9. Now what really gets me kind of annoyed about that is if I was a developer, I would say, okay, Leopard is around the corner, I will continue to support my application at least until, if I'm gonna stop support, I'll continue updating my application until the last OS revision is out, because we're not talking about a simple little application here. We're talking about an application that some people may be using if they've dumped £300-400 into CPU upgrades, and then all of a sudden, a year or two later, it's like, oh, I can't upgrade to the latest OS because I can't run my CPU properly. So, even though these upgrades, a lot of them were plug and play and very easy and whatnot, it's definitely an area that back in the day you took a chance when upgrading these older machines. You really did. But let's be fair, when the PowerMac G5 came out and PowerMacs in general, if you'd dumped all of that money into one of these in 1999, how could you justify, as a prosumer or a semi-professional or whatever, how could you justify buying a G5 a matter of 4 years later? You know, there was a lot of rapid change around that time. Rapid change. Anyway, this appears to be booting up, which is very good. And what we'll do at every stage is check CPU compatibility. So we now should be at 10.4.7. There we have it, 10.4.7. And let's find out when my zooming feature becomes a thing. Not yet, it seems. Must be in 10.4.8 or 10.4.9. Okay, so at every stage we're checking CPU Director. Not that it makes a difference, because if we want to roll back, I haven't cloned my drives or anything, which is probably a little stupid of me. Where is CPU Director? There it is. We'll launch it and check that it is still, there we go, 1000 megahertz, and it's launching just fine. So what we can now do is download 10.4.8 and we can continue to step up. But I'm not going to go any further than 10.4.9 because I know for a fact that CPU Director doesn't support it. 10.4.8 is also not complaining, very handy. 10.4.8, that's when we get our mouse zooming. And for those of you who may have been confused in the last part, why is that my favourite OS X feature? Well, I've got very bad eyesight, and I tell you one thing, folks, that scroll zoom is one of the best things that has ever happened to me, and that is not a joke. Without that scrolling zoom, I would be lost at a computer screen with my eyesight. 1000 megahertz, awesome. So we are, we're on 10.4.8. We've got one more update to go. And 10.4.9 is installing. Now, one good thing, if 10.4.9 messes up, because as I've said, there's some really rough reviews of CPU Director under 10.4.9. If this messes up, 10.4.8 has been working great. And also, really sorry, these version numbers are pretty much destroying my mouth abilities. So if I've been like saying the wrong version numbers, I even labeled a folder incorrectly. 10.4.6 instead of 10.4.7 earlier. They're just all over the place. I keep saying them as well, so it's making me even more crazy. But what I mean is, restart. If this doesn't work, we can roll back to 10.4.8. And when I say roll back, I mean reinstall the OS again, because I've been too lazy to clone. I know it would be a lot quicker cloning this time around, because I could easily clone to the other SSD. That would be pretty blazing. But yeah, awesome. We've got 10.4.9 and we've got 1000 megahertz. We can't go above 10.4.9, but that's okay. What I'm now going to do, folks, is I am going to go up to software update, and what I'm going to have to do is be very, very careful with software update. If it pops up and tries to make me update, I don't want to just not think about it and press enter. I've got to remember that I can't update. So yeah, note to self. Maybe I'll be able to stop software update from prompting me. We'll see, because obviously there are going to be no new updates worth having. But what I do want to do is deselect the combo update. There we go, there's 10.4.11. I want to deselect that so that I can update everything else as and when they come through. So we'll update those two now, and it'll probably filter through and give me some more updates, maybe security and things like that. Now that we have our operating system finalized, the next step is to actually turn to our video card and give it a little bit of attention. A couple of people reminded me about this in the comment section of the last part. I really do appreciate it, folks, the little help and nudges that you guys give me along the way, because it's kind of difficult, especially when there's quite a lot of time between fiddling with the machine. It's quite difficult to remember every single aspect. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about Quartz Extreme, which was introduced in 10.2, I believe. And by default, Quartz Extreme is not enabled or not supported for PCI-based graphics cards. Now, the Radeon 9200 is capable of Quartz Extreme, but as you can see, it displays as not supported in the system profiler. But the card can support it. It's just by default, Apple only allow Quartz Extreme via AGP. Now, there is an application out there called PCI Extreme 3.1, and there are older versions, I believe. This was quite difficult to find online. I didn't have it saved, but if you run it, I think, let's do this live. Here we go. Enable PCI or enable AGP. Now, what you can't do with this application is have Quartz Extreme enabled GPUs for AGP and PCI. Now, if you want to run more than 2 displays from a PowerMac G4 with an AGP slot, your best thing is to put a 9200, this GPU, in a PCI slot so you can run more monitors. But as you can see, at least using this application, and I've heard of no way of doing it, you can't enable Quartz Extreme on both AGP and PCI. So if you have a third monitor, it may suffer on the 9200 in terms of fluidity of the operating system and user interface. So we're going to enable PCI. So we've got to put our password into terminal. That's okay, we can do that. We don't mind password. So I've put my password in. I am super glad that that application actually stated that it was Tiger that we were running, because I was scared that the version was too old, because I know there's a really easy way of doing this pre-Tiger. Patching complete, would you like to restart? Quit and restart. There's an easier way of doing this for Panther. You've just got to edit, I can't remember what the file is called, but it's a super easy way. You can do it without an application, but on Tiger I've got no idea how to do it. But luckily this app seems to have worked okay. So now when it pings back up, we should have Quartz Extreme enabled for our 9200. Of course, this machine does not have an AGP slot, meaning that we can keep Quartz Extreme enabled for PCI with no issues. We're never going to use an AGP card because we can't. So the 2 displays that I will have connected to the 9200, if I ever connect 2 displays, will both be Quartz Extreme compatible, which is great. There you are, folks. Just like that, it is magic. And I have to tell you something. The OS fluidity is extreme extremely noticeable. The operating system feels way better. This machine feels, I am not joking folks, this machine feels as responsive as any of the other Macs I have in this room right now. That makes all the difference. I mean, there's no applications running, don't get me wrong, but this thing is responsive as holy hell. You know, it is sweet, it's a beauty. So, yeah, very, very happy with that. This is actually an extremely important step because despite all of the hardware upgrades that I have done, before enabling Quartz Extreme, the computer still felt old. It still sort of was sluggish, zooming in and out, going around the OS, but just that one tiny little OS change to enable Quartz Extreme makes all the difference, folks. This Mac now feels so much newer, and it's kind of a fun last step because it brings everything together. And I now think, yes, when I started this project with the Rage 128 and the old IDE drive, when I wanted to open system preferences, the machine would take absolutely ages to do it under Tiger. But now with all of these upgrades, Tiger is so usable, at least navigating around the OS on this G3, which is mind-blowing. Well folks, I've got the folder with the previous results here, and of course we're going to start with Geekbench, and wow, this is wild. So 194 is what we scored before. Bit of a weird one here with Geekbench, as you guys probably remember in part 1, I guess, or part 2, God knows. Anyway, we have Geekbench, same version on the same machine, but we've got all of these wonderful upgrades. So let's run it, see what it does. Now Geekbench reports the CPU speed as 499 megahertz. Of course, CPU Director, I've just double checked as well, is still seeing the CPU as 1000 megahertz. And I have to say, holy crap, this is already going much quicker. I'm going to have to make a new folder for all of these results. Actually, do you know what? I am excited. My phone has vibrated. Let's check if it's anything crazy important. No, it's not. Now it's 4:30. We've got to leave at about 5 o'clock because we're going visiting before I've got to go to work tonight. So I'm not going to get all of the benchmarks done in this sitting, but I at least wanted to take a look at Geekbench because I know that the Xbench disk speed tests are going to be crazy better for the SSDs and the hard drives, and I also know that the graphics one is going to be blinking bonkers, but Geekbench is the one that I am super curious about. The fact that it took like 50 minutes before, it's now crunching away and it's like nearly halfway, so let's see if I've got time to complete this. I should have, the way it's going now. I hope so. So just to give us an idea of what we're working with, the 900 megahertz 14-inch iBook G3, the last G3 Mac from April of 2003, discontinued October of 2003 to make way for the iBook G4. It scores 442 on Geekbench 2, so I'm not sure if we'll get there. This machine has got 4 years on the G3 Blue and White, and it's probably much quicker in terms of bus speed and things like that. System bus speed 100 megahertz. PC 100 SD RAM. Maybe not then. Standard RAM, maximum RAM 640 meg. We might get something around the 450 mark. Let's wait and see. Look at that time elapsed, folks. I know that may look a little, long compared to a modern Mac, but yeah, this is sweet. This is so much. Oh, here we go, live. My live reaction. You get my live reaction. What the hell is it going to be? Why hasn't it popped up yet? Oh man, what's happening? What's happening? Is it here? Where's my result? All jokes aside, where's the results? Well guys, I don't know why it's not displaying. So I saved it as a result file, copied that result to my server, opened that result on my iMac, and check this out. 531. Look at this, hang on a second. We've got, I'm using the wrong mouse, confusing. 194 all the way up to 531. Look at that, folks. Just for comparison, let's take a look. The highest end PowerBook G4 that was discontinued in April of 2006 scored 836. That was a machine that was introduced October 2005. 17-inch high-resolution PowerBook G4, 1.67 gigahertz, 836. And my little G3 from 1999 scores 531. I'm going to screenshot this and create my folder, get myself all organised. And if you guys don't believe me, check it out. It's the same name. Look, result 2. It's the same file name. It is my G3. I promise, folks. Look, PowerMac G3 blue and white. I know it's weird that I'm opening it on the iMac, but for some reason it's just not displaying. I have no idea. It just could be an OS thing or something. I don't know, but there it is. So everyone, I've made a folder with my screenshots in, and I've got the first screenshot in there, which of course is the 531 score. Absolutely amazing. I don't know what I was expecting, really. I guess I was expecting for a G3 around the 400 mark. I really didn't know, because, you know, clock speed is clock speed, and I didn't know apples for apples comparisons between the two CPUs. It's not as if I'm an expert on G3 CPUs, but that, to get over 500 in a 1999 blue and white is astonishing. So that is incredibly good news. Now, unfortunately for me, I've got to go and do an evening of work and things like that. I've got to now shut these machines down and leave, but luckily for you guys, you get to see the results in a weird sort of timey-wimey way, a little bit quicker than me. So in the next clip, we'll be checking out Xbench, looking at our discs and looking at our graphics and stuff. So, oh my word, that is awesome. I really hope this continues to be this awesome. Alright guys, I am back and ready to do some more benchmarks. It's a Friday today, so I've got no work later on and I can just chill out fiddling with my retro Macs. Yeah, that is me all over. So 100%. Such a cool dude on a Friday night. Anyway, we're moving on to OpenMark, and unfortunately, for some strange reason, well, not really strange, this can occur. Now that I'm using a different GPU, 1440 by 900 is no longer a selectable resolution. So I'm going to use 1600 by 1000 because it's the closest to 1440 by 900. So yeah, it's not too far off. And obviously this is a smaller res, so if anything, in terms of resolution, the Rage 128 had the advantage. So we'll run it at that resolution and we should be good to go. I'm very excited to see the results. I've used Xbench with this graphics card before, but I've not used OpenMark. So let's take a little look, run, and see how far we get. Now again, just a little recap. This is the ATI Radeon 9200 with 128 megabytes of VRAM. It is the best graphics card that you can put in a PowerMac G3 blue and white, and it is the best non-AGP graphics card for PowerMacs in general. Obviously not counting PCIe cards for the G5, but the best normal PCIe graphics card for PowerMacs around. As I said previously, if you want to put a PCIe graphics card in your AGP machine, then this is the one to go for, the absolute quickest. But to tell you the truth, if you've got an AGP slot, there are a lot better cards that you can put in your machine. Frame rate is starting to get a little bit lower now with quite a way into the test, but man, just like I said last time, this really makes my eyes go funny. I'm going to try not to look at it. Down below 20 FPS, crunching away, seeing what this card can do, going down and down. Oh man, wild, absolutely wild. Check that out. Bonkers. 12 FPS, below 10 FPS, putting this little card through its paces. My word. Here we go. Right then, folks. Oh my lord. So the original score was 139, and the new score with the upgraded graphics card is 1179. So it's like so much better, 10 times better, I don't know, just so much better. And of course this is at higher resolution as well, slightly, so you take that for what you will. But as you can see, Radeon 9200, Rage 128, both ATI cards, but a little bit different in terms of performance. And the Rage 128 was a beast when it came out on this machine, so yeah, they really cranked it out with the 9200 a few years later for the PCI machines. I'm so glad this card exists, I really am. So next up, we've got another place that I'm really excited to look at, and that is Xbench CPU, thread and memory. We've seen the increase in Geekbench. Now let's see how that translates to our Xbench results. We will be doing all of these, but just like the last video, we're going to be doing them separately. So we're just going to start those ones for now, and it'll be really interesting to see. We're basically just going to look at this score, the overall score, 10.77, but we can go down. As you guys see, it was expanded when I took the screenshot, so we've got the memory results, the thread test and the CPU test there. So the overall score for this test on the old configuration was 10.77. We've moved up to 18.07, so almost double. Not quite, but almost double. And if we go down a little bit more, you can see CPU test 11.24, CPU test 25.23. So what brings down that average, you know, what makes it sort of like not a crazy difference, not at least double or whatever, is the memory. Because if we go down to the memory, you can see that it gives us a 9.66. And down here it gives us a 7.65. Now obviously there is 1 gigabyte of RAM in here versus 256 megs in the old config, but the RAM is exactly the same. It's the same speed, same type. So obviously the memory bandwidth capabilities of the machine and the type of RAM that it uses is the constricting part here. But we did get a bit of a boost by maxing out the memory. If we look at thread, that gave us 17.0, and thread gave us 43.77 after the upgrade. So a substantial difference. And by the way, folks, I know this is difficult to look at on camera, but I will be posting all of these images at the end of the video in some kind of slideshow side by side, so you guys can see them. Now then, folks, this is where stuff starts to shake up a little bit. We have got a score of 30.62 on our IDE disk. This is the disk speed test from Xbench when we had the IDE drive installed. We are now going to test Macintosh SSD. That is the SATA SSD being used within this system. This is going to be an extraordinary result. Obviously we didn't get the RAID 0 off the ground, but still it's going to be incredibly different to that 30.62, I think. 115.65 versus 30.62. And for those people who tell me it is not worth putting a SATA card in this machine because of the PCI bottleneck, then just look at that for a comparison between IDE and SATA. Now then, folks, here is an interesting one. Let's test the other SSD and see what results we get there. The reason I'm interested to do that is because obviously this is the boot drive. It has the OS on it. So let's see if there's any speed difference with the storage SSD. So there we have it, storage SSD, which of course is the exact same SSD connected to the exact same card, but just a different one, a secondary drive. 111.43. So in fact, scores about 4 less than the other SSD, so that's within the margin of error for the benchmark. So yeah, that doesn't tell us anything. And also, if these would have been in RAID 0, it wouldn't have been double the performance. It wouldn't have been 220 odd or 230 odd because of the bottlenecks of the SATA Revision 1 card, followed by the bottlenecks of the PCI slot itself, and then just the system bus speed as a whole. So yeah, interesting. But probably the most curious disk speed test that I want to run is on the IDE RAID. Now, the reason that I'm so curious about this is, firstly, I've run this test on an SSD in the G3 before, so I was kind of expecting those results, but I've never, ever, ever used two IDE hard drives on an ATA100/ATA133 card in RAID 0 in the G3. So how is it going to perform compared to the SSDs? I am very interested to see. So again, we're looking at 30.62 for the original IDE drive. Let's see how much of a difference this really made. This is IDE at its finest. 104.69. What a beautiful result. Absolutely awesome. Now, of course, that is two drives in RAID 0, so that score would probably be considerably less if it was a single drive, but what really helps is they are much newer hard drives, despite the fact that they're still IDE. They're much newer than the original 20 gig drive that scored 30 odd. Also, the card itself is ATA100/133, so much quicker. But 104.69, very, very, very close to the speed of the SSD. There's only a few points in it, I'd say, within the margin of different times of the day running the benchmark, I suppose. But one important thing to remember about hard drives versus SSDs is, of course, we have the reliability factor to take into account here with the hard drives because they're running in RAID 0. We have the noise factor to take into account, but also the spin-up time. If you were booting off them, I guess the spin-up time wouldn't be a thing, but I had to wait for them to spin up to run that benchmark, whereas an SSD is always there, always accessible. So that is one thing that the benchmark doesn't take into consideration. But my God, just looking at pure numbers, 104.69, I was not expecting that score. I was expecting to maybe triple the score of this, you know, maybe get around 80 or 90, but I was not expecting it to be over 100. So I am very, very pleased with that result. So time to do a graphics test on Xbench. We had 23.21 for the Rage 128, and of course we were running at the 1440 by 900 resolution, but not sure how much of a difference that makes to this particular test. It's a Quartz graphics test, and you can see the score there of 17.96, and an OpenGL graphics test 32.79. So let's see how our 9200 compares. Start. And after we do this one, we only have one test left, which is the user interface test. Not as dramatic as the OpenMark graphics test. That's why it's nice to run a couple of benchmarks. We've got 31.86 for results, 23.21 on the Rage 128, so quite a difference there. Quartz 17.96, Quartz 30.41. Then we've got OpenGL 32.79, and then 33.45. So a big step up on Quartz, obviously, not so much on OpenGL. So I've just run it again to make sure, 32.59, tiny bit higher, but just like I said a minute ago, this is why it's great to run a couple of different benchmarks, but still, you know, a nice improvement. Our final test, the user interface test, we got 8.04 on the old configuration and 9.72 on the new configuration. So a little bit of an improvement there, but we just sort of threw this one in at the end of the last one just because I'd got to the end of the Xbench window and it was the last thing there. I'd done everything else, so I thought I may as well throw that one in. So that one on its own, 9.72. Versus 8.04, but the user interface feels, you know, benchmarks are benchmarks. The user interface feels so much more fluid, the usability of the machine. So there we have it, folks. We have pre and post upgrade screenshots of all of the benchmarks, and as an overall result, apologies that I look a bit rough, everyone. I've had a bit of a rough day today, bit of a headache and things, but you may notice that I've had a haircut between the last part of the video and this part of the video. Anyway, I am very impressed by the G3. It is performing wonderfully. Every single benchmark is an improvement, with the majority of them, all of the important ones, being a mind-blowing difference. It is so much quicker. But of course, benchmarks are benchmarks. It's all about what the system can do. And I'm afraid that won't come in this video, but I do have a very, very special video planned about the G3, the world's fastest G3, that'll be coming up pretty soon after this series. I've got to wait for a few more things to come in and a few more bits of the puzzle to put together. It won't be like a part 6. It'll be its own video, a showcase of the world's fastest Power Mac G3 Blue and White, and I've got some lovely plans for it. So stay tuned for that. But this video is not over yet. Let's go over to my main system and take a look at a couple of things. So we have got a Molex 2 3-pin fan adapter, just in case I can't find mine. I know I've got a couple knocking about somewhere, but God knows where. A 40mm Fractal Design Silent R3 fan that I'm going to put on top of the CPU heatsink for fun. I'm using these because they look nice and it's only a $5. And a lot of 40mm fans, like the Noctua fans and stuff, are up to like £13–14. So yeah, I'm not spending that much. Next up, two right angle to straight blue UV 50cm SATA cables. 50cm probably way too long, but it means that if I ever want to reuse them in another project in the future, I can. Plus that won't be sort of acres and acres too long. It's only this long, so it'll leave plenty of space for closing the door and things. And then we have a Bluetooth stick, and it's one of these new 4.0 Bluetooth sticks. I have no idea if it's going to work under Tiger. Tiger used to be very, very good with all sorts of things like that back in the day, but obviously it's a little bit different now because the OS is ancient. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It's only a little cool thing anyway, something to fill up the internal USB port. So I'm going to order this lot. So that is that stuff ordered, folks, and until it arrives in a few days, then we are pretty much done with this project, which is very exciting. But I will be using the G3 and installing some applications and installing some games, preparing for future updates to the system in terms of video creation. So if I see anything interesting, then I will show you guys along the way. Okay everyone, it is a couple of days later. It's time to have some more G3 action. It's Monday today, so I'm in one of those sort of Monday moods and beginning of the week, but I've got sort of 45 minutes to play around with my G3 before I've got to go back to work and things. So let's take a little look at what arrived in the post today. Firstly, I've got my Fractal Design Silent Series R3 40mm fan. Nice little fan. I believe I've got the same ones, or at least very similar ones, in my Power Mac G4 MDD. Two of them behind the CPU heatsink, although I did buy them about 5 years ago, so possibly pretty different. But I don't know, pretty much the same fan, I think. And I also got a SATA cable. Now, you guys might be thinking, hang on a second, Tom, you ordered two. Yes, I did. Checked my Amazon. The other one is arriving Wednesday, so day after tomorrow, which is a bit of a pain. So this stuff is arriving in stages. But that's okay, because we've got the fan today, and we've got to figure out how we're going to mount it and stuff, so this will be interesting. And also, surprisingly, I've been using the G3 quite a bit. Well, not surprisingly, I've been wanting to use the G3 so I know exactly how it's performing and stuff, because benchmarks are all well and good, but it's nice to know how the machine actually works. And I've been installing loads of software and things, and I have to admit, folks, I am thoroughly enjoying my G3 experience so far. So yeah, I'm going to move some of these keyboards and things, and we'll take a look at this CPU fan. It is a very little heatsink, isn't it, folks? You know, I mean, this is so much smaller than what we see today, but this was a massive beast back in the day. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Power Mac line or whatever, if you're just watching this because you're finding it entertaining, this was the Mac Pro of 1999. This was the Trash Can Mac Pro. And not even that. These days, the Trash Can Mac Pro is several years out of date at this point. This Blue and White G3 was cutting edge hardware when it came out. Cutting edge. Maybe not so much on the bleeding edge in terms of CPU, because it was only 1 year later, or less than a year later, they introduced the G4. But in terms of graphics and I/O and the overall design of the machine was totally bang up to date. So anyway, let's stop talking rubbish and get on with unboxing the fan. Okay, where's the fan? Ah, the fan's in there. Okay, yeah, I forgot how small these fans were. Cancel what I said earlier. I've got 60mm fans behind the CPU heatsink in the MDD. This fan is tiny. I should have got a 60mm. Why did I get a 40mm? Oh god. Oh man, what is wrong with me? Why did I think this was what I wanted? Anyway, this is okay, guys. This is going to look smart as hell. Oh wait, hang on a second. I'd planned it all along. It fits perfectly. Look at that. It's flush on that side, and it's also, let's look over there, flush on that side. As you can see, folks, I planned it the whole entire time. Brilliant. That was a stroke of luck. It looks pretty damn cool, I have to admit. So obviously it's blowing air into the heatsink, and this, as I've spoken about this, folks, this is not a necessity at all, far from it, but it is good fun and it makes it look a bit cooler. So I'm going to figure out where I want the cable coming out, and well, cable coming out in that direction, in the direction of the power supply. Somebody did say I could split power from the motherboard, because the motherboard's feeding this fan, but I'm not going to feed it like that. I'm going to feed it via Molex, simply because I'd like the motherboard to still properly control that fan. I don't know how intricate the control is, but it does ramp up and down to a certain extent, so I'm just going to keep this fan separate, and maybe I could put it on a little resistor or something. I've got a couple of those noise adapters hanging around, just the inline resistors. I could put one of those in if it's too noisy, and yeah, I can't imagine this will make much of a difference to the overall sound, because the power supply fan is quite loud as well, and that's one place that I haven't really touched upon during this upgrade, is the case fan or the power supply fan. So that's something I'm going to think about over the next couple of days while I'm working, and we'll see what we can do when we come back to that. But yeah, I'm thinking standard cable ties to mount this to the heatsink. So I'm not going to film my cable tying because it's going to be quite tricky for me to get all of the things lined up. But out of my stash of cable ties from that drawer over there, I have managed to find a perfect length and thickness cable tie that will fit through the fan like so. Hang on a sec, guys. Blinking heck. Trying to get my fingers to do what my brain wants them to do. So that fits through the fan perfectly, and also we can slot the cable tie underneath just about. The tension allows us to just about put the cable tie under the retention bracket. As you guys can see there, I'm feeding it underneath. So we will do that at top and bottom, and you'll never even notice the cable ties. So it didn't turn out quite how I'd imagined it, because as I demonstrated earlier, the cable tie would go underneath the clip, but of course there's only a slight gap between the clip and the heatsink because the tightness is so sort of severe with this clip, with this upgrade card, so you couldn't get two cable ties so under there. So what I did was I went around the entire heatsink, and that's okay, but it's kind of a bit, you'll now see the cable ties, you can see them clearly. I don't mind it personally. It's got sort of an industrial kind of look to it, and I mean, in general, using cable ties, we've got quite a blockage here for the fan blades in terms of air. It's worse on this side for whatever reason, but I think that looks pretty smart myself, and it adds a tiny bit of cooling to the heatsink. Now, we've got this cable. What I'm going to do is look to see if I've got an adapter. Well, folks, I can't find an adapter. I've looked for about 10 minutes. I was going to steal the one from the MDD, but looks as if I've stolen it from something else, which is pretty hilarious. I know I've got a couple in here, but there's no way I'm delving behind the motherboard tray of that thing. And that is one thing that I'm going to try and force myself not to do. I've got this huge habit of when I'm doing a project, I get so involved that I start stealing parts from other systems, and it's okay if those systems are just hanging around, but if they're actually functional systems, that's basically what happened with the MDD. The MDD was working fine, but gradually I stole things from it, and now it's nowhere near complete. So, you know, similar story here. and basically I'm booting up just to see if my fiddling with the heatsink messed anything up, but luckily it didn't. So even with all of my bodging about, it's not complaining. As you guys can see, I have been very, very busy installing software. Still got a long way to go, but I'm pretty proud of the software that I managed to install so far. It's a good few hours work getting all of this stuff onto a G3, so very, very happy with that. All for the testing. And one thing we don't have showing up is our RAID for some reason. What's happened there then? I think that may have something to do with my motherboard battery. It's not remembered the clock on a restart, so that could be why the RAID is complaining. It sees the PCI card, so I think we're all good. I just need to get that new battery, and I think that'll solve some of the issues. Overall, the system is working fantastically, so that's the little upgrade. We won't touch this SATA cable until we get the second one, but yes, very pleased. And thinking about the noise level of the system, now that I'm actually devoting brain power to it, it is a bit noisy. One of the fans also sounds as if it's definitely on its last legs. Not any horrendous noise, but pretty much sort of last legs kind of noise. So I'll try and determine whether I can figure out an upgrade path for those, or a replacement path, or whether it's worth it. We'll see what happens. It really does depend on the specifications of the fans. The case fan is fine. I can shove any old case fan in there, but the specifications of the power supply fan is something that I'd like to look at, because it's an 80mm fan by the looks of it. So yeah, it could be quite beefy in there. We'll see. So, success on the CPU fan. We haven't tried it out yet, but I reckon it's going to be completely fine, and I don't think it's going to add any noise really. Maybe a bit of vibration. I can always slot some little rubber pads underneath the corners of the fan or something to stop it vibrating against the heatsink. But all of that is to come in the future when I get more deliveries. So catch you guys when I get more deliveries. Alright guys, we have got the lot, finally. It is a Friday morning, and I am anticipating that this is the last stage of this particular video, because I think what we'll do is throw this stuff in, hopefully it'll all work, and then I'll give you guys a quick little demo of some games and stuff, really super quick, and then that'll be it for the world's fastest G3 series, apart from, of course, the awesome reveal video that I've got planned. Well, not reveal video, but sort of like a demo sort of video. Anyway, so we have our two SATA cables, which is really handy. We've got a fan thing. What the hell am I saying? Molex to 3-pin fan adapter. There we go. A new battery, which is always good, and an incredibly modern, probably non-compatible USB Bluetooth dongle. So all of that stuff is going in the G3 to finish it off. I didn't think any more about internal case fans. I thought if I ever did want to change the PSU fan and the case fan, I can make a dedicated video about it on the channel, and that would be sort of like an added bonus. I'll probably stick it in the same playlist. But yeah, let's find... In fact, let's just open it up right now. So all of this is incredibly simple stuff. It's plugging the fan in, plugging the drives in, and trying to make it look tidy. So I'm going to do that right now. First things first, let's get the hardest job out of the way right at the beginning, so we don't have to worry about it later. Come on, hand, you can do it. Left hand. Okay, we're swapping hands. Camera, right hand. Finally. Why did I make that joke? That was incredibly difficult. Okay, there we go. That is in. Now we can move on to some more fun stuff. Let's get rid of these. It's really been annoying me that these cables aren't a matching red. So very much looking forward to getting rid of these and having some lovely blue cables. They can go down there. They're just the sort of spare SATA cables that I have hanging around. Of course, there's the fan cable, which is nice and thin and black, so you'll barely notice it. It'll go all the way under there, and then I'll put the fan adapter under there on the SSD power, and we've got the battery, which we can just pull out right now. There we have it. There's the old one that everyone was telling me to get rid of. No problem. I am listening. So now the power comes round just like it did before, but instead of going straight into this black twin SATA adapter, it goes into the Molex pass-through of the fan adapter first. So the beauty about this little area that I accidentally created with this drive bracket is that there is plenty of space to hide cables. So I'm just sort of wedging those under there, and you can't really, unless you're really looking, you can't notice that sort of jumbled mess. I'm just trying to cram this under this cable so that it sort of holds it back a bit more, and then you can see this super thin fan cable coming along here, which will be very easy to tie somewhere a little bit later on, but I want to get the SATA cables in first just so I know where I'm tying everything. So this is what the inside of my balls to the walls G3 looks like, and this is the complete internals, which is awesome to say. I'm very, very pleased with the way this has turned out. Now, one thing that kind of bothers me, I'm not really OCD or anything like that, but when doing an upgrade like this and I get everything looking really nice, it bothers me that these 4 RAM sticks are totally different. Not one of them is the same. That really, really does bother me. I have no idea why. But as you can see, they're different height and everything. So I maybe shouldn't have pointed that out, because maybe some of you wouldn't have noticed, but now you've noticed. You agree with me, possibly, that it looks a little bit higgledy-piggledy down there. But other than that, I'm very, very pleased with the internals of this machine. Now, in terms of the SATA cables, you may notice how I've tied them to the CPU heatsink. That's because the right angle connectors weren't going to work over here, because this bracket is way, way too shallow to allow the drive spacing to use right angle connectors. I should have thought about that, but that doesn't matter because the right angle connectors are sitting over here. There's a bit of a flex, but the bend is not too bad at all. Now that I've tied it to the heatsink, it's even better. So they're zip tied all the way over, and they just sit there, and the door closes just fine. So that is what it looks like inside. Very exciting stuff. We're going to close the door and see how she runs. Quick power up test to see if this fan works, and then we'll close the door. There we go. It spins no problem. And there's a bong. So we are indeed laughing. So I've got a nice little selection of software on here. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of iLife 05, I believe is the last version of iLife that properly supports this machine. Also iWork 05 would be awesome, and Final Cut Pro 3. So one thing that may delay the next part of the series, or well, this is the last part of the series, but one thing that might delay the video that I've been telling you guys about is trying to hunt for software. It's quite difficult these days. I'm very lucky that I've built up a collection of all of these applications and so many more on my server, but I still have a lot of gaps that I want to fill. And it's pretty much, sometimes with the old software, depending on, you know, things like iLife 05 are in an awkward position because they're not really old so that they're readily available online as like retro software, but they're not new, so they're very difficult to find at the same time. And obviously something that makes looking for these things quite difficult, especially Final Cut Pro 3, not to be confused with Final Cut Studio 3, one thing that makes it difficult is you often run into upgrade versions being sold as full versions, and you can just see by the disc in the box it says upgrade, and that's the way it is. So a little bit of a pain to try and locate software. But as for games are very, very easy to get a hold of for the Mac, which is awesome. So I've just installed a few. I've got The Sims, Harry Potter 1, Harry Potter 2, Doom Legacy to run new and improved version of Doom using the original WAD files. It adds sort of lighting effects and stuff. In fact, this is the video that got my channel suspended, so I better not talk about that too much. Quake 3, Tony Hawk 2, Tony Hawk 3, Tony Hawk 4, Max Payne, Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, and the original Call of Duty. So a good few games to try out there. I'm extremely shocked that Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 runs on this system. I've been playing around with it, and I've been playing around with Call of Duty, and I am so pleased with the performance. Call of Duty it's only really playable at the very, very lowest of settings, and Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 is also on the lowest settings, but for those two games to run at all on this system is absolutely phenomenal, and they are totally playable. This is an ATI title as well. This runs better than Call of Duty, so if I just jump into the game. Well guys, after I booted up Roller Coaster Tycoon earlier, I played around with it for a little bit, and then I had to go to work and things. So Jess actually played this game for a considerable amount of time today and gave it a good test for me. I'm now back from work. It is Friday evening. I'm booting it up again to show you how damn well this game runs. It is incredibly impressive for a G3. This is Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, and it is beautiful. Also, this has been running for a substantial amount of time today. No stability issues, no cooling issues. Normally when you fill a Power Mac up to the gills, you expect some kind of, my MDD was always a bit flaky. It's not going to be like that next time, don't worry, I'm going to really do it well. But this system is not showing any flakiness at all, and now that I've got that new CMOS battery in it, or PRAM battery, sorry, it is much better in terms of clock and everything that used to mess up with the clock and stuff, and all things related to that, like problems with the discs and things, but now it's behaving itself fully, just as it should. So check out this theme park that Jess started building earlier. So here we have Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 loaded up, and it is extremely smooth considering the specifications. It is 100% playable. It's not the smoothest frame rate in the world, but man, I remember when I played this as a kid on PC, I'd get, nothing quite as good as this. In terms of how smooth the game runs. Let me try and zoom in a little bit. This mouse is a little bit flaky with the scroll wheel for some reason. There we go. So as you can see, we've got a lot of people wandering around, and this is only a small theme park. She wasn't on here for too long, but as you can see, loads of people wandering around, all of the rides and attractions doing their bits and bobs, and the game is running really nicely. We can zoom right out and still get a nice swooping view of the theme park. All the settings are cranked down, so that's why the graphics may look a little bit not as good as if you guys are familiar with this game, but this is looking super sweet. Running on a G3 this is, folks. This game is, 6 years newer than this system? 7 years newer than this system? And it is running totally playable. Maybe if you started putting big coasters in and, made a full-size theme park, yeah, you could have a bit of slowdown, but there's room to crank down the resolution again. I believe this is running at 1440 by 900 or something. I can't remember. It's not the full res of the monitor. Couple of steps below, maybe it's like 9 something by, I don't know, something, but yeah, it's running pretty sweet, and room to turn it down further if you wanted a little bit more out of the frame rate. But even compared to when I started recording this clip, now that it's had a chance to catch up with itself a little bit, it's actually running smoother. As you can see, that is definitely totally fine. It's not what I would describe as a slideshow. It's amazing that this game runs at all on this system. If you had the original CPU in the Rage 128, you could wave goodbye to even booting this game up. So yeah, super happy with that. And that is it, folks. That concludes the world's fastest G3. I know I've shown you barely anything, but don't worry, I've got an awesome video planned, but please be patient. I'm waiting for deliveries of certain things that are going to complete the setup of this machine. Also waiting for software, which could take a while to get my hands on. But don't worry, this series has inspired me to maybe create the world's fastest some other PowerPC Max. I'm going to get back on it. I really hope you guys have enjoyed. Thank you so much for the support. Please leave your thoughts and feedback down below, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for joining me on this journey with the world's fastest Power Mac G3 Blue and White.